Inspiration comes in many forms, and for this project it took the form of a British Australian named Chris when he tagged me in a post on RMC's Discord. Now you probably know Chris best from his time on the This Week in Retro podcast, or maybe even from his own YouTube channel 005 Agema. But for anyone not familiar with his work, well, Chris is a massive fan of his flight sims and his Amigas. In fact, over on his own YouTube channel, he recently picked up a yoke style controller for playing flight sims on the Amiga. But that is a digital controller. What you really want for playing a flight sim is an analog controller. Now those were very popular on the PC, and there is one such example of one there. This Gerbers analog stick with its 15-pin D-sub that you would have connected to the back of your PC sound card. True analog sticks for the Amiga though, they are few and far between. But Chris reached out to ask if I knew any way of connecting this to that. Well, between the two of us, we soon found an old post on EAB linking to an even older document over on Aminet, which contained schematics for doing just that. So we could have just easily hand-built an adapter, but I thought this sounded like the perfect excuse for me to download KiCAD and have a go at designing my very first PCB. It's all based on the contents of this LHA file created by one David Templeton back in 1996. We will be downloading this later over on the 2000 because there's a bit of software within that that will let us test our adapter. But within there we get this schematic, and yet more or less straight through, other than a couple of capacitors and a couple of switches. Now if we refer to the document that comes along with the schematic, well, this explains that the switches are there because there was no standard for analog joysticks on the Amiga. Some software companies wrote the analog drivers differently, swapping the XY axis or fire buttons 1 and 2. So having the switches within the design allows you to account for that. Now if we scroll down through this, the two capacitors, they're just there for sensitivity adjustment. David has recommended the use of 0.15 microfarad caps. So if we take a look in KiCAD, or is it KiCAD? I'm not really sure to be honest, but this is what I have drawn out. So 9-pin on this side, 15-pin on this side, two double pole double throw switches and a couple of capacitors, although I am adding a pin header to allow you to enable or disable those. So yeah, it might look like a bit of a mess, but please excuse that. It is my first time using this software after all. But that was quickly translated into this layout. So we've got the DB9 on the bottom side, the DB15 on the top side. There's the two sets of switches, the two caps and the little jumper block. We can take a look at that on the 3D viewer. That's hopefully what it should look like when it's finished. So I created the Gerbers on one quick order from JLC later. And there it is, the first blank PCB that I have ever created. Yeah, it is incredibly simple. It is just a passive device. No active logic on this whatsoever, but it's my first attempt at doing something like this. And to be honest, I am super excited to get it together and try it. So we need a DB9 for there and a 15 for there. Although I think it would make sense to do the bits in the middle first, and in particular those two capacitors. And yeah, it wouldn't be like me, would it? But I set the pads out here for 0805 components and then stupidly ordered 0603. So we will need to stretch this out a little bit here, but they will fit on there okay. We'll just tin up one side of this. And then we'll offer up the caps. And yes, when getting these made, I just went for the hassle option rather than getting them gold plated. There's no edge connector on it or anything like that. So why not just save a few quid and just get it done with the hassle finish rather than the ENIG. And just because that's the only surface mount bit, I'm just going to clean that up now with a bit of IPA on a cotton bud. I'll just save us trying to do it later once everything else is in the way. Next up then, we'll just do the little jumper sitting beside that. And as you know, when I'm doing a jumper block like that, I will put the jumper on it. And then we can just hold it in place with a bit of blue tack. Do the two switches next. I'm just using these basic wee switch blocks here. Then finally it's the DB9. This is a nice tight fit in there. And the DB15. And that'll be it. And that's us done. I'm going to close that jumper. Just like that. And then if we need to swap the XY axis, you can toggle that. Or swap buttons 1 and 2, we can toggle that. The Amiga actually supports a 4-button analog joystick. And this is wired for that. But you only have the option to swap buttons 1 and 2 as per David's schematic. PCB by CRG, inspired by 005 Agema, based on schematics by David Templeton. Analog stick PC to Amiga. One thing we are going to have to do, actually, just thinking about it, on this side, I'm going to have to remove those two studs on that. Those two can stay on the PC side, because you know, the likes of that just plugs in there. You can even screw it into that. But on that side, well, I can't plug that into the Amiga, so those will have to come off. Although when I do this, what might happen is that metal shroud might fall off. Yep, it's going to. But there's just nothing that we can do about that. The ground is connected internally, obviously, you know, through the pins here anyway. So that shielding ground isn't necessarily needed. That will just plug in there now though. So let's test it. So as I said, we're going to use the 2000 to test this, but to save me hooking around the back of the machine, I've just plugged in this DB9 extension cable. So that will go in there, and then the Gravis goes in there. I have downloaded that Deluxe 22 LHA file and extracted it here into this drawer, analog joystick. And if we run this application here, AnaCal, analog calibration, does this do anything if I move the joystick? Well, yes, we are getting an input there. So does that mean that our adapter is working? To the x-axis, that seems to be correct there, left and right. The y-axis, up and down, that seems to be correct. It seems to be going from 0 up to 175 on the y-axis, 0 to 182 on the x-axis. Although it doesn't really seem to be centering itself very well, because it's sitting there at 140 with a stick in the middle. 0 to 182, that would be about 90. I suppose that makes sense there, does it? 92 average X, 88 average Y. Even within that dead zone in the middle there, I mean, the tiniest movement of that stick, look how much it is changing those figures. Now, this stick does have adjustability at that point there and in there. There's a little screw which allows you to calibrate the joystick. So let's see if we can get this set up to work with our adapter. So as I unscrew that there, you can see that that first number is changing. 103 into the 90s. There's 90. I did notice there, at one point it did flash up calibrated. But it's so unbelievably sensitive. If I move the joystick and let it recenter, yeah, calibrated. Hopefully that is it. Now it is a 4-button stick. Button 1 just resets the calibration program. You can see button 2 flash up there quickly as I push it. This seems to change the color of the text on that. And there's button 3, and there is button 4. The trigger button on the front of this stick, that's just another button 1, same as that one there. On the side of this stick, the 2 grey selectors, well, they let you actually pick which button you want to assign to that button and that button. So I have it in position 3 for that one, making that button 3. That's in position 4, making that button 4. This here is actually a throttle, almost like a 3rd axis, but that will not work on the Amiga. The adapter that was built, it only handles the X-axis and the Y-axis. And in fact, I don't even think there would be enough pins in the 9-pin adapter to carry a 3rd axis. And indeed, I don't even think the Amiga can support it. So we don't need to worry about that. But if that is our joystick calibrated, should we maybe try it in a game? So let's try a bit of F-15 Strike Eagle 2. This is one of the few games to actually support the analog stick on the Amiga, as you can see. So it's currently got me selected down there, Second Lieutenant Glenn. And I'm supposed to be able to scroll through these. But while I can push up, to scroll up through them, as soon as I center the thing again, it just automatically comes back down to that. And that makes me think that we've got a problem. Again, it's worked its way over to that corner. I would prefer just to try this game in Rookie because, well, I'm not very good at flight sims. So let's just get into the game and see what's happening. Right, okay, yeah. That's a complete uncontrollable mess. What is going on? I did download the guide as well, and sensitivity adjustment. So this just talks about the microfarad caps that we have installed there. 0.15 microfarad, and that is what we have installed. 150 nanofarad. So I have definitely used the caps that they have recommended. You can even look at that schematic diagram here on the Amiga. There it is, and that is exactly how I have laid this out. It does say here that note pins 1 and 2 on the Amiga side are for the CH Flight Stick Pro or Fighter Dual Pro 2 only. Pins 1 and 2 go through to pins 10 and 14 on the PC joystick side. That is fire buttons 3 and 4. So it's nothing to do with that, and I certainly have all the rest of this hooked up correctly, or I think I do anyway. What happens to the sensitivity of this if we remove the jumper? Something weird here, but I don't think that's working right. If I pull this to its extreme on the right, you can see that the X there is only reading 27. But I take it to the extreme on the right and up, well, the X jumps to 100. Why would it do that? So I think what's happening is that with the jumper removed, those two caps are no longer connected to ground, but the two caps are connected together on the ground side, which I suppose is actually joining up the X and Y axis. So when I have that removed, it's just not working right. I suppose what I really should have done was fitted the caps and another double pole, double throw switch, so that when it's off, the two of them are completely isolated from each other. At the minute, with that jumper off, the two of those are connected, and yeah, that is connecting the X and Y axis. If we go back to the schematic that we just looked at, you can see that's exactly what's happening there. With that switch open, so with my jumper removed, the X axis is connected to the Y axis through those two capacitors. So yeah, that was never going to work right. I think what I should maybe try and do is just remove those two caps, and let's test it again. Okay, caps removed. So let's plug it in again. Let's launch the calibration program. This time we have a range on the X axis from 0 to 40, and on the Y axis from 0 to 38. What does it play like though? And look at that, it is still. Oh, that is perfect. Ignore the graphical glitching, that's more than likely just the Pi storm that's in the 2000 here. But yeah, that is now perfect. Can we blow something up? Need to go on a bearing of 217, or sorry, 207, or 200 now. Must be that thing I'm trying to chase. Yeah, we've got a red circle around that. So presumably an enemy aircraft. Can we shoot him down? Yeah, got him. So that now plays really well. And it would seem, certainly for this game, with this joystick, we do not want those capacitors in there. I have tried another few games, but unfortunately not too many of them seem to work right. Now, I'm honestly not sure if that's maybe a problem with this machine and its Pi storm. I haven't updated that in a long time, I do need to do that. But this title here is certainly working, A10 Tank Killer, and the joystick is behaving really well. Had a quick play with a couple of other values of capacitors, and to be honest with you, no matter what you have on there, it just seems to make it worse. So I think what we'll do is just remove this whole bit. These are scrap, but I suppose the thing needed revised anyway because it seems I can't spell inspired. So let's jump into KiCAD, and we need to get rid of that bit. The rest of it though, I'm just going to leave. I'm going to leave the two sets of switches on it, because we have certainly found that one game at least where we need to swap over buttons 1 and 2, and there may well be others on which the X and Y axis have been swapped, so let's just leave the two switches. We'll switch to the PCB. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. And I think that's right now. Although it would probably look better if I moved the switches more into the middle of it. So give me a second to play with that. And in fact, you know what, for all it is, let's just redraw the whole thing again. Or well, let's redraw all the traces anyway. So we'll put one button, say about there, and the other button about there. Okay, I think that'll do, but we can use this opportunity to also tidy up a couple of other things. For example, on the 9-pin D-sub here, you can see where I made those ground connections there a bit bigger, but forgot to do it for the 15 pin. So let's just change those. I made them 5mm. And one other thing you can maybe see is that the size of the PCB, it could use being a little bit bigger just to come out to the edge of the two D-sub connectors. So I think I need to take that up to about there. And then one other thing that I was told recently, it's best not to have your ground plane right to the very outside of it. Best to just bring that in a little bit, sort of like that. And do our fills again. I'm going to add just a couple more vias just to connect the ground planes. And you know what? We should probably add a mounting hole so that we could put a case around this. I think if we just put a nice hole in the middle there, that would probably do. Of course, I now need to figure out how to do that. One mounting hole added to the schematic. Oh, we've got an error. That's because I didn't add a footprint for this. What do you think? An M3 sized hole? That should be enough, shouldn't it? I think that's pretty central there. Don't need the text. Although perhaps I should move those two traces on the bottom side just to get them away from that. We'll just route this one round the long way. There, I think that looks a bit better. Yeah, I think that'll do. Let's just run DRC. 2 warnings. Oh, that's only because I have modified the footprint of the DB9 and the DB15. But other than that, I think we are good. No, I need to fix my spelling mistake. There. That's sorted. Let's take a look at it in 3D. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So I'll just create some Gerbers and then we'll get it ordered. Well, it's about 3 weeks later and this little box arrived on the porch today. So hopefully this is our revised PCBs. It only took so long because I just paid for the cheapest postage. We're not in any hurry for this. And yep, there they are. There's our new board, complete with its little hole in the middle. Still haven't designed a case for it yet, but at least this time I got all the spelling correct. So I'm just going to throw this together quickly and then we'll test it again. It is even easier to assemble now since it's just the 2 ports and the 2 switches. But one thing I do need to do again obviously is take this metal cover off just so that this side will fit into the Amiga. Although it is a bit of a shame we can't keep that on there. If there was some sort of countersunk screw that might do the job. Although I've got an idea. If I get a wee cheap capacitor and cut the legs of this. My proper flat snips are in the drawer. Just use those things instead. But if we stick that through there and solder that in place, because there's metal on that side and metal on that side, surely that would do the job, wouldn't it? If I just get that balanced like that, and then try and gently drop a bit of solder on this side, and if I do use my proper cutters this time, if I cut that down flush with the plastic that's there, and put that on, and flow a lot of solder into that hole. There, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? That's certainly holding on that side okay. A little bit rough on the inside, but from that point of view, it looks fine. I'll do the same on the other side. There, I think that looks pretty good. You can obviously tell that's been soldered back on, but it is well and truly on there. And with that in place, it'll give us a tighter fit into the back of the Amiga. Okay, we're back over at the 2000, so let's test it. Ignore this board sitting here, that's a work in progress for other things. But I've still got the extension lead plugged into the back of this machine, so let's try that. And yeah, that is now a really good fit. There's the old one, it doesn't have that metal bit on it. And yeah, it does fit, but you know, it's loose, and that's because said metal bit is missing. This one, that is perfect. And my Amiga 2000 is boot looping, is it? What is going on? It does this from time to time. It's the Pi Storm that just needs reseated. And there we are, we're up this time. So, adapter plugged into the Amiga. And joystick plugged into the adapter. So if we run the analog calibration tool again. So if we just start with a reset of the calibration, and then we'll just go around in a circle. And on the x-axis, we have a range of 0 to 39. So it's sitting there in the middle at 20. On the y-axis, we are 0 to 38, and it's sitting there nicely in the middle of that at 19. Let's try our game again. And it was F15 Strike Eagle 2. Analog joystick. And yeah, that is controlling perfectly. Oh, I think I have the buttons 1 and 2 swapped around, so we can fix that easily just by flipping that switch. Yeah, that's better. Our guns are now on the trigger, and our missiles will be on these buttons. Again, don't really pay any attention to the graphical corruption on the screen. That is just going to be the Pi Storm doing silly things. Yes, I still have not updated it. So it does work really well in those flight sims that support it. Although I must say that of all the ones in the list of supposed supported games, not all of them seem to work. There's even a couple of games in there that have an analog joystick option, but if I try to select that, this does nothing. Flight sims though are not really my thing. I've never really got on with them very well. The one genre of gaming that I do get on with though is racing sims, racing games. And so one game that I'm dying to try is Microprose Formula 1 GP. It's funny how it's all the Microprose games that seem to support analog joysticks. And as awesome as this intro is, I can't really play too much of it for you in fear of getting a copyright strike against the music. It is a fantastic Amiga sort of rendition of the chain. I often boot this game up just to listen to it. Cowbells and all, but I'm just gonna have to skip it. So we need to enable the joystick, much like we do in any of the games that support it. We'll go to the main menu, Game Options, and there it is. Use analog stick, plug into port 1. Yes, please. And now we need to calibrate this thing. So, fully to the left, press fire, right, and fire, center, forward, back, center. And that's interesting, isn't it? The diagnostics here, joystick diagnostics, that's giving us like a readout from the joystick. And it's actually giving us a range from 0 to 200. In fact, it's more or less 0 to 200 on both axes. 0 to 200 left to right, 0 to 190 forward to back. But when we ran the calibration software, it only gave us a range of 40. Although the help file associated with that bit of calibration software, it suggested that the full range readable by the Amiga should be 0 to 255. Now, when we had the adapter with the capacitors on it, the range in the calibration software was more or less the same as this is reading out now, 0 to 200. With those removed, like we have now in this revised version of it, in the game it's reading correct. In that calibration software, it's like it's reading 5 times less than this. So what's going on there? I wonder if the way these games were written to make use of the analog sticks, I wonder if that discrepancy was allowed for within the software. Now within the software of this, they increased the sensitivity of the readout from your analog stick to take account for a basic adapter such as this. Just a theory anyway. But let's try it. So we'll go back to the main menu. We'll just do a practice on any circuit. And we'll just go for Great Britain. Silverstone. Let's try it. Now this game does have an awful lot of driving aids. For the sake of fairness, in terms of testing out this thing, let's turn off a lot of those driving aids because they do an awful lot of stuff for you, including braking, steering, gear change. Yeah, they more or less play the game for you. So you can sort of see there just that we're sitting in the pits. As I start to push that forward, it is very sensitive, but you can see that there is a certain amount of analog control in that. Let's grab a gear and see what it plays like. Yeah, it's even more obvious when we're actually driving the car. I'm just going to take my time on this first lap. It's been a while since I played this, but straight away, yeah, it is very natural with the analog stick. When using the digital stick, the steering is sort of all on or all off. You know, you're either fully locked or you're not turning. With this though, it just comes very naturally that you have a degree of movement in your cornering. And I was doing really well there until I've overshot that one. But at least that just goes to show that, you know, I'm not making this up. Overshooting this corner as well. I'm out of practice. Used to be really good at this. Even just playing it with a keyboard. But I've obviously lost my touch. Right, let's see if we can get a flying lap in. I've overshot a corner again. Come on. One minute 48. Not breaking any lap records, but the game definitely is easier to play with the analog stick than it would be with the digital stick. Well, there we are, one analog stick adapter and my first PCB designed, built and working. Now granted, it's not my schematic, I just copied that one that we found on Aminet. And yes, it maybe does need another slight revision because I don't quite have the overall length of the PCB just perfect yet. It could maybe use being another 4mm, I think, longer, 2mm on either side. And that's just so that the overall length of the board encapsulates the size of the ports hanging off either end of it. A very minor niggle though, it doesn't in any way affect how this thing works, but just the fact that it does work, and it was my first time screwing about with KiCAD, well, I could not be happier, and it has given me the confidence to maybe try something a little more complicated. In terms of the adapter itself, and is it worth building one of these? Well, I suppose if you are a die-hard flight sim fan, and that game that you are a fan of just so happens to be one of the few that supports an analog stick on Amiga, well, in that case it probably is worth doing it, because it only costs a couple of pounds to put together. Or I suppose if you're a fan of that Microprose F1 GP, much like I am, well, for me, I think it's worth it for that alone. Just because the analog control stick, well, it does give you a far more natural feel of input for those games that really need more than just on or off in terms of direction. You do almost get a sense of acceleration with this as you turn it. It maybe is a shame that not more games on the Amiga support this sort of stick, because with that then you natively get 4 buttons rather than just the 2 that you have with the digital joystick. And in fact, most games only ever use 1 anyway, so perhaps a shame that they didn't push it towards this route, have more games support the analog stick, and maybe it would have helped other titles, maybe such as beat 'em ups, and especially when you were into the 90s, because trying to play some of those arcade ports with just the single fire button, well, it did take away something from the experience. Although, that said, I'm not really sure how those games would play with an analog stick, with a range of motion that these things are intended to pick up, rather than just your digital, you know, left is left, right is right, up, down. But yeah, I'm waffling. I am pretty happy with this, how it turned out. And Chris, there is one of these in the post on its way down to you. So might take a while to get there, but it is on its way, and hopefully it will let you enjoy your flight sims. Hopefully your flight sim is one that is supported, but maybe once you get it and once you have it tested, maybe you'd let me know. But that's going to be it for this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed what you've seen, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? There's still plenty more yet to come here on CRG, and I'll see you next time.